Before we begin, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the folks at Amazon Music for partnering with us on this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast. But more on this later. Right then, let's get right into today's episode. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Crosshair Pre-Fon Track Limits Grand Prix preview on the Inside Line F1 podcast. We say that for a reason, because last year when Formula One came to Austria, how many track limits infringements did we have, Kunal?
Oh.
I know the number. Come on, you know the number.
No.
Well.
I mean, it was over 1,100, close to 1,200.
1,200
There
is
we
the
go.
number.
Interesting. The race that forced the FIA to employ AI. They actually realized humans can't do this job in real time. We need artificial intelligence. And then voila, we had artificial intelligence solving track limits.
Is this going to be the first time Formula One comes to any Grand Prix of this problematic scale in terms of track limits with AI? I think it is, right? Because all the circuits we've had so far this year, kind of okay. But this place, you know how many penalties we had here for track limits? 9. And you won't believe it, but Kevin Magnussen actually didn't have the biggest penalty. In fact, he gained a position even though he got a penalty. He only got a 5-second penalty, whereas Yuki Tsunoda behind him got a 15-second penalty. So there we are. Kevin Magnussen went from P19 to P18 because he got a track limits penalty. What a guy.
Wow. Only in Formula One. But you're right. This is where the scale of F1's AI solution for solving track limits will come very handy. And I also believe, okay, all seriousness, so that people know we know our stuff and Formula One as well. Between turns 9 and 10, which is the last two corners, there is a gravel trap, which is 2.5 meter wide, which is a Formula One only solution. They will remove that gravel trap when the bikes go racing, Samal.
Was it there when you were there at the Kushmani test in Austria a couple of weeks ago?
I don't believe so. No, frankly, also, I didn't really go. That was the only corner. I went till turn 8 and then I sort of walked back because it was literally in the wilderness. It is one of the most gorgeous circuits in Formula One. My goodness. I call it the Wimbledon of F1. You know, when you watch tennis at Wimbledon and when you watch tennis elsewhere, it's a Wimbledon that literally stands out before any, in front of any other place. So it is gorgeous. So we can talk about the circuit a little later. I'd love to share more about the test as well, obviously.
Yeah, and actually we should talk a little bit more about the context heading up into this race before we introduce who we are and what this show is all about. This weekend, we're about to witness a grand territorial dispute. The Dutch-Austrian alliance are about to fight the Commonwealth team for supremacy in Austria and then Britain right after this. It's Red Bull and McLaren's home races, one after the other. And believe it or not, these two races are where McLaren have been strongest in the last couple of years. If there's any race to upset Red Bull, it would be right at their home. And that battle, Kunal, is going to be so much fun. And to add to that mix, it's not just Red Bull and McLaren who we are talking about. In 2022, Ferrari won here in dominant fashion against Verstappen and Red Bull. And last year, they also qualified second and third in the normal qualifying session too. So, three-way battle, probably not 100%, but we know that McLaren are going to be close.
Oh, why don't we just hype up a 4-way battle since Mercedes is thinking they're always going to be there? But it seems like it is going to be Red Bull versus McLaren up at the front, and Ferrari and Mercedes just about sort of catching them up. A lot of it is down to temperatures, down to circuit characteristics, the tire compounds in use, and so on and so forth. But will it be a papaya win in front of the Orange Army? And then Lando Norris will say, look, so many McLaren. Oh, there we go.
I'm wearing the colors anyway.
You're wearing the colors.
You know I'm manifesting it properly.
Whatever happened to you manifesting a Carlos Sainz win at every Grand Prix of the season? But Samuel,
you don't hurt me like that. Come on.
4.5 minutes in, This is where we cue the introduction. Let's go for it.
We should. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Inside Line F1 podcast. My name is Somil Arora. I'm the voice of the MotoGP Indian Grand Prix, which I desperately hope comes back early in 2025, among other things as well, including being the commentator for the Indian Racing League, the Indian Supercross Racing League as well, and many other national championships in India. The other voice you were hearing is the man who started this podcast. Well, Kunal Shah has been the former marketing head of the Force India Formula One team, and he's also currently an FIA accredited Formula One journalist who's working as an F1 consultant and producer for the Viaplay network in Norway. That sounded a little bit confusing to you? Let me simplify this. Whatever content you see on the pre and post shows on all the Viaplay shows is made by this guy. So you're listening to someone who knows his Formula One. I've put you under a bit of pressure now, Kunal, haven't I?
But nothing like soaking up Formula One pressure. You wake me at 2 a.m. and I should know my stuff. That's what
But
makes
we are at what?
Yeah.
Aren't we at 2:30 in the morning anyway?
That's the time Somil Arora is awake in Indian Standard Time. And it's the opening. Can you imagine somebody actually said a Dutch-Austrian alliance taking on the Commonwealth Alliance? My goodness, I would have never thought of these things. But this is what makes you so great, Somil Arora. Thank you for doing what you do.
Well, the compliments fly both ways, as will the track limit penalties. But we should come back to one more thing. In this episode, we're not just going to talk about the things you should look forward to in this race, but we're also going to get a very special clip from the one, the only, the most famous Austrian in Formula One. Debatable, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Dr. Helmut Marko. We're going to listen to him when he was on our podcast this time last year, talking about the story of how Red Bull Racing truly came alive and his conversations with the late, great Dietrich Mateschitz. That is going to be on this episode later on, so stick around for that. But I think we should begin with the talk of the town, right? The two-way battle between Verstappen and Norris. It couldn't have gotten closer. 2.2 seconds is genuinely mind-blowing. But hear me out. Spain has not traditionally been McLaren's best circuit. Austria, on the other hand, is where last year McLaren went from being sixth in the constructors right up to getting their first podium and then following it up with a big result in Britain as well. We know McLaren are good here. They know it as well.
So what are we looking out for? Will McLaren, Lando Norris deliver that perfect weekend, which is what we're hoping for? No safety cars, nothing, the best starts, the best strategy, the best wheel-to-wheel battles. And what better a circuit had to go racing against Max Verstappen and Red Bull Racing than Red Bull's home race? There will be hordes of Dutch fans in the Orange Army, or in the orange t-shirts and caps, the Orange Army as we call it. There will be, what are those, smoke bombs? Is that what we call them?
The flares.
The flares, yeah. And I mean, just the atmosphere aside, the circuit in itself offers so much character, so much history that it represents, so many opportunities to go racing. I mean, it's incredible. I absolutely love this circuit, Somil, and the challenges also that it offers. Maybe we should probably even get to that, right? Because there is low speed, there is medium speed, there is, of course, high speed stuff. It is the shortest lap time on the Formula One calendar. I think 62 seconds is what it took a couple of years ago. Last year was 64 seconds. Well, out of the 10 corners on the circuit, just two of them, there are just, one sec. Yes, I knew you were going to say this, but let me say, officially, there are 10 corners at this circuit.
Debatable.
But
you were saying.
Yeah, but debatable, okay. Out of which, just two are left-handed corners. Okay, I absolutely love that about the layout, okay. And the debate that I'm on your side with, Somil, is turns 2, 5, and 8 are not really corners because they are flat out.
Exactly. Turn 2 is blatantly not a corner. Not even in bikes where they just don't even lean a little bit. Now it is in bikes because they have a chicane over there because things got a bit too scary and Valentino Rossi almost died. Thank God the chicane is here, touch wood. But it's not really 10 corners. And the tricky part about this is that we see a different variety, as you rightly mentioned. Turn 1 is slightly medium to high speed, But when you get to the later parts of the circuit, the proper turn 2 gets very slow. The proper turn 3, I know they're officially 3 and 4 now, but they get so slow. And the thing is, around the outside over there, we've seen so many cars thinking they can make a move, but eventually you can't. And it's that dicey little spot where you feel you can go for something, but in reality, it's tighter than you think it is. And that's where we see some great racing. I can remember Albon and Lewis Hamilton in 2021. Perez also tangling with him. I think it was 2022, if I'm not mistaken, Albon and Perez.
Yeah.
And that one corner produces so much racing action. And with these cars where it's easier to follow, and if there will be any difference in strategy and tire compounds, we will surely see a lot of racing action. And that just excites me so much.
In fact, I'm going to bet on this very thing that you just said. Into turn 4 and turn 5, the right-hander which goes downhill, we will have at least one car that'll get tagged, will probably spin away, or will take the gravel trap, take the exit road and rejoin. That's probably what's going to happen. But just to add a little more about the circuit is just 4.318 kilometers long. Okay. For such a short circuit, Samuel, there are 3 DRS zones, and the DRS zones actually equal up to 1.75 kilometers, which means 40% of the circuit is DRS zones.
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
And the rest is sausage curbs, basically.
Well, yeah, that's true. And in fact, I'm glad you said sausages, because this is one of those circuits which is the heaviest on the vehicle suspension. How often do we actually get to see that, right? Because curb riding is very important to getting a quick lap time. But there are these sausage curbs where the height of the curb is the main challenge for these cars, and the speeds at which you sort of ride them. So curbs is important. And then 3 DRS zones, so 3 very heavy braking points. Braking is crucial. But because it's a short lap, Samuel, you need more cooling solutions for the brakes. Okay. And when you cool the brakes too much and you sort of use those cooling solutions, you actually end up needing more tire warm-up. So a single lap tire warm-up in qualifying is very, very difficult to get. And then guess what? Short circuit, 20 cars out on track, Q1 in qualifying is going to be a traffic nightmare. And one last thing. Can you imagine the tow that one could get around this circuit? 3 DRS zones. That's what. And I think Red Bull will. They almost gave Verstappen a tow in Spain. Here they will plan to give him a tow. Maybe it's going to be Checo Perez, and further down the road, Nico Hülkenberg will give him a tow.
But doing so is going to be harder, because when you're in that middle section where you've got those couple of really quick corners that are almost flat out, and the Red Bull giant bull in the middle of it, over there's barely any inside line. There's only one proper fast line, and that is where you start preparing for the lap ahead. So in qualifying, which there are going to be 2 of this weekend because it's a sprint weekend, we are going to see lots of cars impeding each other for sure. It happens every year. It will happen this year as well. But I'll tell you what happens every year again. A battle in Austria. I can only cast my mind back to 2019, where we saw the first proper duel between Verstappen and Leclerc. And because this circuit is so wide open, because it has so few corners and so many DRS zones, you can actually send a move and make it work. Now, this is the one thing that we've been missing in the battle between Verstappen and Norris. When you think about it, what does it take to beat Red Bull? So far, they've only been beaten twice. In one instance, it was an ill-timed safety car that cost them. In the second instance, it was a circuit characteristic that just didn't allow them to run the car in the way they wanted to. Monaco. Now, we've never seen Norris and Verstappen fight it out wheel to wheel against each other with a similar pace difference. Because in Barcelona, McLaren were compelled to go longer. They had no other choice, right? They had to go in the clean air. Austria is one circuit where you can follow. I like the sound of this, Kunal.
Yes, and I think one key takeaway, and one of the things we mentioned in the Spanish Grand Prix review, was that McLaren needs a strategy, needs to execute a race where they are pressurizing Max Verstappen for a longer duration of the race than just the last 10 odd laps that they did. So last, 10% of the race that they did. Of course, this is assuming that they are following Max Verstappen. If Norris just gets it on pole and, starts from pole and keeps P1 at the end of the first lap, it might just be difficult for him to keep that P1 purely because of the characteristics of the circuit. What you mentioned, it's easy to throw in a move. It's easier to follow. Lots of straights, 3 DRS zones makes it just that much tougher. But it's possible, and we'd love to see that. We'd love to see that wheel-to-wheel battle. And what you mentioned about throwing a move, we love Spa for the gradient that it offers, right? Spa is about 102 meters from the lowest to the highest point. Austria is 64 odd meters. And one of the gradients where it's most visible is when you go up to turn 3 and you come down to turn 4. You could literally see one wheel on the inside, the front wheel, the front right wheel, almost lifting off. And isn't that just such a pretty sight? So the fastest cars in the world is literally doing a wheelie of sorts. But I think it is going to be Norris versus Max Verstappen. Although I have a feeling Oscar Piastri is going to bounce back. He's literally, for the first time ever since his debut last year, had one weekend where he was nowhere. And he himself has claimed that it doesn't make sense where I was not quick. Could it be two McLarens in the mix? Could it be Piastri taking the fight not just to Verstappen but also to Lando Norris? And he really needs that.
And Norris needs that as well, because Red Bull Racing are surely going to be handicapped up at the top. Even though Sergio Perez probably hasn't had the best form this year, you do expect a comeback, but it's highly unlikely given the circumstances we find ourselves in. It's far more likely that Oscar Piastri can elevate himself from where he has been in Barcelona. And Norris will need that badly, because if there are two McLarens up against one Red Bull Racing car, it will really upset the apple cart. Imagine a scenario where Norris does get pole, Verstappen is second, and to force Verstappen into a really weird spot, Piastri is in third. That is what teamwork is all about, because you then eventually keep one car up ahead so that it can slow Verstappen down and really not get him to box in an ideal scenario. It could so happen that Lando Norris boxes earlier, Verstappen has to wait and then stick behind a slower Oscar Piastri or something of that sort. If Piastri goes longer. That scenario is what McLaren need a second car up there for, and Red Bull need for as well, which is where the pressure on the second drivers is so big.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is not Samuel Aurora dreaming at 3 in the morning Indian Standard Time. These are the scenarios teams discuss day in and out. They're constantly monitoring what are the possibilities, where the simulations will sort of show the lap times and so on, and they build on these possibilities. Like George Russell said, I saw Fernando Alonso make a similar start at the start from P4 in Spain, and he just channelized his inner Fernando Alonso. But for all the McLaren fans, here are two key stats. The last McLaren pole was way back in 2000 with the two-time world champion, Mika Häkkinen.
In Austria, you mean?
In Austria, yeah, of course. In Austria, yes. The last McLaren win in Austria was way back in 2001 with David Coulthard. Can you imagine?
We've also had on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. Actually, both of them we've had on the podcast.
Yeah.
Very proud to say that. But yes, okay. And this is again one of those circuits where just because you're on pole doesn't mean you win, because in the last 12 races, just 5 of them have been won from pole. However, 8 out of the 12 races have been won from the front row. And in 2020, where we actually had 2 races thanks to COVID at the race, there was an Austrian Grand Prix and a Styrian Grand Prix, right? And the record books will always say just one winner of the Styrian Grand Prix. But the truth is they were just the Austrian Grand Prix, right? Hamilton won from 5th, Bottas won from 4th. And in 2018, Verstappen has also won here from 4th place. So sort of more grid positions open up for once. And that just shows how volatile this Grand Prix can be. And just, by the way, if any driver starts out of the top 10, 0 times out of 12 races has the top 10 won at the Austrian Grand Prix.
Man, my bets on Nico Hülkenberg are gone now. Oh, yeah. No, wait. He always is in the top 10 here, isn't he? Last year.
Yeah. Go
Yeah,
on.
didn't he qualify fourth in sprint qualifying here last year?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, Mick Schumacher's best race, where he went wheel to wheel year with Hamilton, wasn't it? A couple of years ago,
Yeah,
was
exactly.
here in the sprint. And Haas's best result here was in 2018 in the Grand Prix format. Grosjean was fourth, Magnussen was fifth. So they've literally come to a circuit that the team pretty much likes. And
I
go on.
legitimately have a doubt. Is that because there are less corners? Like, no,
And
genuinely.
40% of the circuit is what do you say, DRS zones. No, but I think in
Yeah.
I mean, of course, 2018 to now is a long shift in philosophies and so on. But in general, Haas has done fairly okay. I mean, Nico Hülkenberg, what, 4 5 times he's been 11th in a Grand Prix, which is not too bad, I would say. But yeah, and of course, everything gets complicated with the F1 sprint that's this weekend. So there's one
Yeah.
practice session, then we've got the sprint shootout, then we've got FP, there's another practice session, then we've got a sprint race, and then we've got the Grand Prix, right? And I absolutely love this, Somal, because the big challenge, and Brazil 2022, when Red Bull got it wrong, we always remember that. Oh, will Red Bull get it wrong one more time? They've never gotten it wrong after that. But bet still out on whether the sprint race is fun or no. But I still think that just one practice session is great, because the teams have to make a compromise. Do you work on all the areas of the car, or do you just work on the areas where you can get maximum lap time out of, and you can get the best setup compromises? And I sort of just love that you don't have time to build efficiencies in your models.
And it just so could happen that instead of Red Bull getting it wrong, McLaren might get it wrong. Ferrari might get it wrong. I mean, anyone can get it wrong when there's just one practice session. And we saw this in China as well. So many teams were compromised for that very reason. Verstappen's run was also compromised, but knowing how good that guy is, he eventually got it back in the middle of the race. Not at the start, in the middle. But this is no China. This is Austria, lesser corners, and McLaren generally have been good here. And I did a bit of digging, and I get a feeling that McLaren really have one big reason to be threatening this week. And it's got a lot to do with the rubber, not just the car. Now, cast your mind back to Austria 2023. McLaren, heading into this race, was sixth in the Constructors. Andrea Stella said it has been one of their worst starts. They're looking for a new philosophical idea on the car, which eventually came in at this very race. There, McLaren qualified second with Lando Norris and got their first podium of the year. The tyre compound in that race that they used and really banked upon to get a jump on the Aston Martins and the Mercedes around them was the hard compound tyre, C3. Cast your mind back to Miami this year when McLaren won their first race in ages. The mediums really worked out well for them. What tyre was it? The C3. This time, of course, in Austria, we always tend to use the mediums and the hards. And guess what? The hards, once again, are the C3 compound tyres. Now, there's no proper data way to validate this. We always have to wait and see if it works out well. And obviously, conditions make a major difference. Austria this weekend is going to be far cooler than Miami was. And there is a feeling that it might be cooler than last year as well. But again, last year it rained, and in the race it was sort of a weird environment. This year it's not meant to rain officially, but there is rain in the area. But keeping those rain factors aside, generally, McLaren have been quite decent on that particular tyre compound. And knowing the way things have gone, it could be a real big strength for them heading into this weekend. So, really, watch out for McLaren on that hard compound tyre stint. I think it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on.
And this is fantastic stuff. This is exactly why people love the content we do, to understand these red threads, as we call it, these insights or these trends that we catch. It's the C3 compound, as you put it. Let's see how they go this weekend, because the C3 is the hard tire nominated compound this weekend. And you started this whole point by saying maybe McLaren will get it wrong. I think they've gotten it wrong, or they've been challenged and fallen short several times for them to turn around and now literally say, you know what, we're going to go get it right. We're going to go get pole. We're going to try and dominate a little bit for our own selves. And to just add a little more perspective, after Spain, Max Verstappen said, we cannot get it perfect all the time. We cannot get the perfect start, make the perfect overtake, make the perfect strategy each time. That's a lot of pressure. And then he ended it by saying, we need to add more performance to our car. So Max Verstappen, ladies and gentlemen, is actually being challenged by the resurgent McLaren team, and at the moment at least by Lando Norris.
Man, it's going to be a good fight. It's going to be a really good fight. And we should talk about predictions in a bit. But let's actually listen in to one Helmut Marko before we talk about Ferrari, Mercedes, and all the other teams. And also Alpine. We have a lot to talk about them as well. But here's Helmut Marko, who was on the Inside Line podcast a year ago, talking about the formation of Red Bull Racing and how he spoke to Dietrich Mateschitz and made it all happen. Let's listen in.
Mr. Mateschitz is from the same area in Styria, very near to the Red Bull ring, so there was a connection, and I don't know exactly how it happened, but motor racing is expensive, so Mr. Mateschitz said, let's do something for the young people that they can afford this sport. And that's why we started the Red Bull Junior team, and it was mainly to support young drivers. But when first Red Bull bought Jaguar and a little bit later Minardi, the approach was a different one. We said, okay, now we have to have a goal, and the goal is we must find drivers who can win a Grand Prix. Not only is that we support them, to win a Grand Prix. To win a Grand Prix is a criteria. To win a championship, you never can predict. It's depending on the whole package. How good is your chassis? How good is the engine? How strong is the driver? But that was the aim. So we changed the approach. We were going for more performance, and if the people didn't perform, we had to stop our support. And then it was melting together. Junior team, Formula One, everything came together. It was, of course, perfect with Minardi, or in the early days, Toro Rosso. The aim was to give young drivers a chance, because in a top team, you can't go in a top team without any experience. And there was Franz Tost, who did this job very well. And looking to the past, we have now Vettel with 4 championships. We have Max with 2. Hopefully a third is pretty soon following. So the whole system was a success. And it was not only on the driver's side. We also started with a new approach. We said we would like to do it different. And one thing was Christian Horner, who didn't have any experience as a F1 team principal, but he was very successful in Formula 3000. And from there, we built it from scratch, I would say.
Actually, it's so interesting. You've scouted drivers and a team principal as well. Very interesting. On that front, actually, I want to start out at the very beginning, because with RSM Marko, right, that's after you got done with your racing career. I read in the middle that you managed some top drivers like Gerhard Berger and Karl Wedlinger, and then you started your junior team. But was that how Mr. Mateschitz approached you? Like, hey, I have an idea. Why don't we do something?
It must have been something like that. I can't remember exactly. He was in Graz, where I live, and he stayed in the Schlossberg Hotel, and we had the presentation of Karl Wendlinger's F3 outfit, and there the discussion started. Yes, and then in the end it was, why couldn't we do something together?
Dr. Marko, on that front, you must have looked at it and been like, wait, why do you want to do this? Because again, it's so absurd, right? If you tell it to any outsider that there is an energy drink brand that sponsored drivers and then had their own team and won so many championships, it just sounds absurd. But did it ever click to you that, hey, this is not as weird as it sounds?
It's a little bit weird, yes, I agree, but we have to come further back. St. Marijn in Mürztal, that's the place where Mateschitz lived, is very near to a hill climb race, which is called Alpine race. And in the early 60s, Jochen Rindt, you know,
Correct.
the world champion, the first Austrian world champion, raced and Mateschitz watched this race. And there were also little ice races, you know, in winter when the fields were frozen, and ski errings with spikes and things like that. So there was already a passion which was in Mr. Mateschitz's mind, or however you say. And when his company was getting successful, he was, of course, always a fan of extreme sports, and so motor racing was a clear, good opportunity to place the product placements. And then with a lot of passion, but the main thing, we both had the passion for motor racing. And that went through all the development. It was always the passion which was driving him, was driving me, and we wanted success, but in a not success under all circumstances, success which is built up and which also was fun, you know. Because I remember the first championship with Vettel, it was such a surprise in Abu Dhabi. He was not the favorite. Favorite was Alonso, and the man with the second most points was Webber. So, and it wasn't decided till the very last lap if we win or not. The same happened to 12. And all this emotion, that's part of our DNA.
I love Helmut. I love how direct he is. I love how pinpoint he gets. And it's a very Austrian way of telling a story, right? Just going from detail to detail with precision. But he also didn't just tell stories on the podcast. He told us a lot more about how the decision-making in the Red Bull camp works, why they decided to let go of Nick de Vries, how they evaluate their junior drivers, and so many more things. And that full episode, even though it happened a while ago, it's still just as relevant and just as entertaining today. So I get a feeling you should go and watch that one as well.
It's timeless, and I've enjoyed a relationship with Helmut Marko for many, many years, and I just love how he just knows the pulse of a conversation, and I love such people. And, you know, usually there's some faff, then some pulse, and then some faff in regular conversations, right? Like, how's the weather? Oh, what did you do today for breakfast? And, oh, how are things? You know, and then finally, by the way, Somil, you know, that by the way moment. With Helmut, it's always, by the way, I have, 5 things or 3 things that you want to discuss happened. And then all the niceties come in. So the niceties do come. You just have to wait for it. The order is a bit reversed out there. But it's an absolute delight. One of the only English podcasts to have had Helmut Marko. And it's definitely one of the feathers on our cap, Somil.
It is. And I just have a question for you, since you've spoken to him a lot more than I have. What's the weirdest thing you've spoken to him about? Like, or the most random stuff? Have you guys spoken about a meal or a travel destination or something like that ever?
20 years from now, I'll tell you what we spoke about.
Well, 20 years from now, we'll also find out why Lewis Hamilton changed his crew before the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, how many years are left now? Wait, 15. How many years were left? I forgot. Well, we'll go back to the replays and find out. Or you'll tell us in the comments anyway. We know you love us that much to respond to us. But we should talk about Ferrari, shouldn't we, Kunal?
Yes, we should, because they keep talking about themselves. And of course, they've sort of a little bit of an implosion with their drivers getting a bit angry. Frédéric Vasseur was surprisingly taking sides, saying, Charles didn't really lose out on anything with that attack from Carlos. And Carlos was cheeky that he attacked on a lap when they actually had agreed pre-race to save tires. But irrespective, they need to find performance. And something we all know, performance, especially upgrades, is relative in this sport. So if somebody else makes a bigger step than you do, and even if you've made a step forward, technically you've not made a step forward when it comes to lap time. So for Ferrari, the team with most wins, 6 wins here, most poles, 8 pole positions here, they definitely need to be in the fight. Can you imagine a Ferrari versus McLaren battle for the ages, for all the good old fans who are still waiting to cling back to the sport, along with a Red Bull Racing in the mix? Wouldn't that be the perfect cocktail? All the good old purists of the sport, who've been following since the 60s and 70s and 80s, like yourselves, even though it was 40 years before you were born, right? Versus all the new age drive to survive induced or led in fans who probably are following just the most recent teams who have succeeded. And then you bring Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, and Mercedes in the mix. I think that's just what would be a heady cocktail of stories, mixes, narratives for Formula One. By the way, talking of Mercedes, they've said the sabotage was not a criminal case, and they've actually given some other ways for Mercedes to handle that sabotage email that came through. Yes.
Wait, tell me more. Like, what exactly did they say?
That's all they said. There's nothing more.
That's all they said.
So all this whole sabotage thing, which went from social media onto real life drama and television, we will have another follow-up of that with Toto Wolff later this weekend. But there's nothing. And by the way, you mentioned the most popular Austrian in Formula One. That you mentioned was Helmut Marko. I'm pretty sure Toto Wolff is extremely pissed, and he refused to come onto a podcast just because you didn't consider him for that. There you go. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot he's an Austrian as well. How can I do that?
Yes.
No,
but that's okay.
That's silly of me.
Kimi Antonelli.
This weekend,
go on.
Go ahead. I was about to say that this weekend Christian Klein is also going to be remembered a lot for his TV work, and isn't it Alexander Wurz who's a part of the Drivers' Commission?
Yeah, GPDA. He's the chairman.
He's going to be pestered a lot for track limits.
I think track limits might not be that big an issue this weekend if the solutions work. Do you
bet? We'll see. We'll see at the end of the race. We'll see on Monday. We'll evaluate this point and put it in our checklist. But you were saying something on Kimi.
On Kimi and Toto Wolff. It almost seems certain that Kimi is going to get the ride. And very interesting how I think Jacques Villeneuve put it, and I'm growing to understand this philosophy more, is Kimi Antonelli getting a break in Formula One is also because of Toto Wolff's ego. So what all has Toto Wolff won? He's won races, he's won championships, he's built the best car, the best engine. They've done all that. But they missed out on Max Verstappen. Max was talking to Mercedes and to Red Bull, and he just signed with Red Bull, and the rest we know is history. Now, Toto Wolff wants to be that guy who's found the Max Verstappen of the next generation. Could this be where Kimi Antonelli comes in? And I don't know why we call him Kimi Antonelli when that poor lad's name is Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Okay. But that's one of those things which hopefully we'll sort of maybe have some news in the driver market. I believe Carlos Sainz to Williams was waiting to be announced last week, but Flavio Briatore was suddenly announced out of nowhere. And hence...
One second. Can you say that Flavio crashed the Sainz announcement?
Oh my goodness. He did. Yeah. And now Flavio Briatore, I get a feeling he's going to sell the team with him being the team boss, even if he's not the team owner in terms of shares. He's probably going to help Alpine get a sale or going. Or if Alpine continue to stay, Bruno Famin better be scared because Flavio Briatore is coming for his job.
Well, why don't we talk about Alpine now that we're on that subject anyway, right? We were speaking about Ferrari and having internal tussles over there, and Sainz and Leclerc both attacking each other. But at Alpine, they're now testing other drivers for their seat. They've tested Jack Doohan in free practice. Mick Schumacher is expected to be in... Actually, not expected. He's announced to be in the car in some time as well, testing the old Alpine. And I just wonder now, what direction are Alpine going in? They are considering putting a non-Alpine engine in an Alpine car, which basically means a factory team is about to outsource its engine making to another team, which defeats the purpose of why they are a factory team. And they're looking beyond their driver academy, which has great drivers, for someone else. And we saw that Jack Doohan is having a pretty decent year. We saw that Kushmania had a great Formula One test as well. Of course, it's their due diligence to evaluate Mick as well, but I'm just confused about where they can go potentially and what is the next way out for them, even though they've been improving in terms of the car perspective.
I mean, Gasly's scored points 3 consecutive races. They had both the cars in Q3. They know they've got one heavier chassis, which they keep, or one heavier part of the car, which they keep alternating between the two drivers. And the interesting thing is Alpine has become the third fastest team in the pit lane in 2024. They've had 2 second pit stops, so they are in the whole pit lane championship that Formula One maintains. They are just third behind Red Bull and Ferrari. So Alpine are making steady gains, trying to come back. And I just think if Mick Schumacher was to ever get a second shot in Formula One, it's going to take a Flavio Briatore, who did all the magic with his father at Benetton in 1994 and 1995. If there's a big if there. But yeah, there we go.
But we had Christian Danner on the podcast a few weeks ago as well. And Christian Danner is a former Formula One driver and one of the most legendary German commentators, very well respected in the paddock. And he said that he's not quite sure of a second chance for Mick, even though he respects his work and even though he likes it. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But he feels that the boat has sailed by. It'll be a little absurd if Alpine do end up going back to him. But again, we'll see. But before we go to predictions, Kunal, it's heartening to see Alpine really make the gains, right? Double Q3 in Barcelona, getting double points as well for the first time. In the same environment where other teams like Sauber are getting more investment, but are not able to make the same operational gains, it's kind of nice to see Alpine get back to where they are. And they've sort of cooled down the internal conflict that's been going on as well. So say what you want. I think Famin is doing a pretty decent job given the circumstances he's in.
Well, I'm going to reserve my comments because I still feel they need...
There is more to come, no?
Of course there is. Of course. The trajectory is what matters. Just because they've had a bad start doesn't mean we keep kicking them down each time. I believe they just sort of lack the tools. If we go back to even what Otmar Safnauer said on our podcast earlier on in the season, that Alpine is just behind on tools, which is why they're struggling not just the chassis side, but also on the engine side of things. And let's see where it all goes. But I would love to, again, see Alpine take the fight. Because on a weekend when Racing Bulls wasn't doing too well in Spain, Alpine was suddenly quicker than even Aston Martin. And Aston Martin also needs a good weekend. So when you put all the pieces together, everybody, needs somewhere or the other has had a bit of a blip in Spain, and they need to put a better weekend out there. And again, Alpine, a works team. I would hate for a works team to be sold to a privateer. There's always some bit of more prestige, right? And Alpine is, of course, thrown in the hat in the Carlos Sainz, signing as well. They want to co-sign Carlos Sainz. Pretty much every team wants to do that except for Mercedes and Red Bull. But yeah, there we.
But wait. Yes. I don't get it. How is Alpine a works team? They're a works team that just don't work. Even though they are in the right direction, the history...
You're right. And they've seen more management changes than even Ferrari in the last 5 years. And they wanted to be the Ferrari of France, right? So maybe they are sort of picking some cues which make them feel like they are the Ferrari of France, I guess.
Not bad. And it's only perfect that they hire a really old and masculine-looking man who's got the best white beard and a reputation for being extremely angry, but very decisive as well. It sounds like what Ferrari did with... how can I forget his name? Arriva Bene. But it's a similar sort of profile, isn't it? But Flavio's more racing than Arriva Bene was. But Flavio also came from business, didn't he?
Yeah,
Flavio. Comparison.
I mean, Flavio came from business, and he comes from, I think, the best school of communications, because he said something like, I think I'm a genius in Formula One. I don't think I've heard Adrian Newey say that till date. But Flavio just believes he needs to be the one saying, I believe I'm the genius in Formula One. Yeah.
Did he say that before summer of 2009?
He said that now.
Oh, he said that now.
Yeah. Not before Crashgate or whatever. Yeah, he said that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, we both get the right to reserve a comment each in every episode. I think I'm going to reserve my comments for this one.
Yeah.
But predictions, we can't reserve anything over there. Of course, the heart always manifests a Carlos Sainz win. But this time, for real, my mind is going Lando. I've been impressed by everything that's been happened. The qualifying lap in Barcelona was amazing. If not two qualifyings, at least once, I expect to see him on pole this time out. And if it's the main one, even better, because McLaren at the front is something we haven't seen for a long while. So I want to see how Verstappen responds to when he's the chaser instead of the one being chased. So I'm going to go for Lando Norris winning the big one. But where's your money at, Kunal?
I think it's going to be Max Verstappen, but it'll be a very, very close battle. I still believe to fight operationally, efficiently at the front, there is a bit of lethal. There's a lethal element when it comes to Max and the Red Bull, and when they're in that sort of zone of theirs, which is what they've hit 61 times already in Formula One. And let's also remember, very crucially, Red Bull are disadvantaged, right? They've had fewer wind tunnel hours and the whole sliding scale aero regulations that are there, right? For example, I believe after this Sunday's race, the scale for the second half of the season gets decided as well. Okay. And Red Bull had 10% of their allocation actually cut off from October 2022 till October 2023, which is literally 8 months ago, thanks to their budget cap breach. So I think all of this is also sort of coming into play. Finally, they've sort of hit a peak. They say there are not many incremental gains to make. And I'd love to see if McLaren have taken the step forward, even if it's half a step ahead of Red Bull, how Red Bull responds, how Max Verstappen responds, and how I don't know how it's going to play out, but I just really want that bloody good battle where every room you walk into, people are like, did you watch that? It wasn't Max. Oh, well, it was Lando, but they had to fight for it. I'm waiting for that, because we do that when it comes to 2005, 2006, especially, races like San Marino and whatever. Oh, well, Fernando and Michael were just at it all the time. I would love for those conversations to come out of the Formula One circles and more into our social circles and in life, Samuel.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed we get a race like that this weekend. But what are your predictions, folks? Let us know down in the comments and also on our social media channels at Inside Line F1 Podcast, at Kunal Asia, at I am Samuel Arora, and also, let's not forget, F1 Stats Guru Sundaram as well. Fingers crossed that he's recovered very, very soon and we can get him back on the podcast too. Okay then, folks, we'll see you on Monday for the post-race review of the Austrian Grand Prix. We'll catch you there. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast. Before we ended, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Amazon Music once again for partnering with us on this episode of the podcast.